Bond may not have his license, but at least he's got his lighter. Hey everybody, welcome to Mainly Movies. Today, we're going to be continuing my 007 review series with the 16th James Bond film, 1989's License to Kill. If you're new here, please consider subscribing for a variety of movie-related content like reviews, rank lists, and trailer reactions. All my reviews include a breakdown of the pros and cons, my rating, and some tailored film recommendations, so be sure to watch through to the end of this video for all of that extra content. License to Kill stars Timothy Dalton, Carey Lowell, and Robert Davi, and was the fifth and final Bond film directed by John Glenn. It tells the story of James Bond, played by Timothy Dalton, as he's suspended from MI6 while seeking revenge on a drug lord. What is this nonsense? A Bond film with extensive scuba sequences that I didn't thoroughly dislike? Even with an excess of underwater scenes, Timothy Dalton's second and final appearance as 007 provides us with another really solid entry in the franchise. In terms of tonal consistency, I think Dalton's two films are really the first consecutive movies in the series that feel like they actually belong together. For 27 years, these Bond movies have been randomly sliding around on the tonal spectrum. One movie would be sorta serious, the next would be cartoonishly goofy, the next would be kind of a mix. It was always very inconsistent. And then, of course, you throw all of the Bond actor changes on top of that, and things were really all over the place. But the Dalton films, at least briefly, provided some consistency. They steered the franchise away from the over-the-top silliness of the Moore era and adopted a much darker, more serious action-driven style. As with the previous film, License to Kill begins with a spectacular cold opening and an equally unspectacular theme song, before diving into an exciting story with plenty of impressive action sequences. And as with many great Bond films, we get another evil villain with a shark. It's been too long since our last one, hasn't it? But instead of our typical campy, shark-infested lair, we end up with something much grittier, which matches the tone of the overall film. This is easily the darkest Bond story, at least until the Craig era, and really expands upon what The Living Daylights set up. That previous movie established a little bit of friction between Bond and his superiors at MI6. He takes some liberties with the orders he's given and doesn't fully obey them. That story element gets magnified here and becomes a focal point as Bond completely disobeys his orders and becomes a rogue agent. But whereas The Living Daylights had an incredibly complex and convoluted plot that was a bit hard to follow, License to Kill is about as simple as it gets. It's a revenge story. Even though Timothy Dalton does a fine job here, I gotta be honest and say I'm still not a big fan of him as Bond. I talked about it in my Living Daylights review, but there's just something slightly off about him for me. He always has this sort of smarmy, smug quality to him that doesn't match the charm or charisma that the three previous actors brought to the role. In fact, I think Dalton would have been very well suited in a Batman villain role. I think of that every time I see him in these movies. But despite my issues with his casting, I think he was definitely a better fit for this more serious action-heavy style than Roger Moore would have been even in his prime. These Dalton films have also been 2 for 2 regarding the Bond girls. If you've watched any of my other Bond reviews, you've probably noticed that the Bond girls have been a bit of a point of contention for me. When they're capable characters with an actual role in the story, I usually really like them. But when they're essentially just ditzy arm candy for Bond, I'm not a big fan, and we unfortunately had quite a few of the latter variety during the Moore era. But The Living Daylights gave us the mostly capable Cara Malovi, and now, here in this movie, we actually get 2 pretty decent Bond girls, and possibly the first jealous love triangle in the series, if we don't count Moneypenny. Lupe is a decent character, though Talisa Soto's delivery comes across a little stiff at times, but I actually really like the character of Pam Bouvier, and I think she and Bond have good chemistry, especially given their similar skill sets. Even though License to Kill takes an even more serious tone than The Living Daylights did, it's not all doom and gloom, and there are still a handful of things to smile about. For starters, Bond manages to once again pull off a simple yet effective animal disguise. We also get a few fun, somewhat lengthy sequences with a fairly ancient-looking Q, who actually gets to spend a bit of time in the field. Another thing we haven't seen for a while in the franchise. In addition to a creepy fish statue with a baby face, we're presented with a strangely bipolar villain who vacillates between being a murderously cold hearted drug lord and a goofy comic book villain. Seriously, the guy walks around with an iguana wearing a diamond studded collar on his shoulder. In spite of some mild silliness, like I said before, this movie is perhaps the darkest of all of the Bond films up until this point, and has some surprisingly brutal moments, both physically and emotionally. The darkness certainly suits the Rogue 007 premise, though I can't help but think that this was the type of dour revenge story that belonged immediately after On Her Majesty's Secret Service. Without spoiling anything here, Bond's revenge response seems a little excessive. The character he's seeking revenge on behalf of has definitely been a fixture in this franchise from the beginning, so there is a relationship there, but up until this movie, the extent of their relationship wouldn't have warranted such an all-in response from Bond. That being said, there are elements to this revenge story that very closely mirror events from Bond's past, which I think makes it a little bit more personal for him. Either way, I would have liked to have seen a Lazenby follow-up to On Her Majesty's Secret Service in this vein 20 years earlier. Alright, let's talk about the pros and cons. Pro number one is definitely the darker tone and story. I love the goofy, silly Bond movies as much as the next person, but there's something cool about the movies returning to the more serious espionage roots of Fleming's novels, and it's made even more interesting by the fact that we've got a rogue Bond here. We've seen hints of Bond's darker side in past movies, and in The Man with the Golden Gun, we even get a sense of what he could have become had he not joined MI6. And we get to see that play out here. His license to kill gets revoked, and he no longer has the oversight and orders of MI6 to rein him in and prevent him from giving in to some of his darker, revenge-driven impulses. The second pro has gotta be the Bond girls, especially Pam Bouvier. It's been a while since a Bond girl has made it into the pros of one of my 007 reviews, but I think it's earned here. Bouvier is not only an important part of the plot, but she's also a very useful and competent character. She's a pilot, she's trained by the CIA, and she can really hold her own in the action sequences and fights. Lupe is not bad either, and she's certainly important to the plot, providing Bond with plenty of insider information, but he's definitely more on the same plane with Bouvier skill-wise, and I think they have good chemistry. On the con side, my only big issue is how Bond's vendetta response is handled. I like the revenge story, and I think it's really interesting seeing Bond go rogue. It's just that his incredible revenge response seems really excessive and sudden. Again, I'm trying to avoid spoilers, so I'm intentionally being a little vague here, but the person he's seeking revenge on behalf of has never really been established as having a relationship with Bond that's close and personal enough to warrant such a response from him. They've always seemed to have a sort of background, friendly business relationship, but they're suddenly portrayed as being extremely close in this movie, which feels a little out of the blue and more like a plot device than anything else. But Bond's over-the-top, all-in response is actually very understandable if you take his past experiences into account. Viewed in that context, his actions here are really just very delayed, redirected retribution for events in his own past, which is the kind of thing I wanted to see for 20 years of the franchise at that point. Unfortunately, that angle is only vaguely hinted at, so if you've never seen On Her Majesty's Secret Service, you're really only left with that out-of-the-blue relationship reasoning for Bond's actions, which I think is far less impactful, and I wish they had taken the time to make the connection to On Her Majesty's Secret Service a little bit more explicit. I'm gonna give License to Kill 3.5 out of 5 paws. The darker, revenge-based narrative expands on the tone we saw in the previous film and makes the Dalton era consistently satisfying. I would recommend License to Kill to people who like darker, more serious-toned spy stories. This film and its predecessor are kinda outliers in this franchise, at least regarding their tone, and are great choices if you want something a bit closer to Fleming's vision of the 007 character. And this isn't just a spy film, so if you like revenge stories, you'll really like the plot of this one. If you liked License to Kill, I would recommend the 15th Bond film, The Living Daylights. That one was the film immediately preceding License to Kill and served as Timothy Dalton's introduction as Bond. It has very similar serious action-based tones and is a very good setup for establishing this version of Bond. If you want a bit more insight and context regarding Bond's actions here, you definitely gotta watch the 6th Bond film, On Her Majesty's Secret Service. That film has some similar and important events that get hinted at here and really shed some meaningful light on Bond's response. For another good spy gone rogue story, you might want to check out the aptly named Mission Impossible Rogue Nation, which is the 5th film in the Mission Impossible franchise. And if you liked the insider sabotage elements of the story, I think you should really check out Akira Kurosawa's Yojimbo. It's a Japanese samurai movie, so obviously the story is quite a bit different, but there are some undeniable similarities when it comes to how our hero in each film goes about dismantling the villain's enterprise. Alright, a couple questions for you guys. Number 1, have you seen License to Kill? If so, what'd you think of it? And number 2, what's your favorite film featuring a rogue agent? Be sure to leave your answers in the comments below so we can get a discussion going. Alright, so if you got some enjoyment, insider information out of this review, I'd appreciate it if you'd hit that like button. And if you haven't done so already, please hit subscribe or add it to see more videos like this. Till next time, this has been Alyssa with Mainly Movies, the way life should be.